SRAP Senior Regional Representative Ashlen Busick is going to be leading our discussion on coalitions, and truly there's no one better than Ashlen to lead such a discussion. Ashlen grew up on a family farm in northern Missouri next to one of the state's largest corporate hog operations. Her family's ongoing battle for justice and advocacy for family farms led her to SRAP, where she assists communities across the Midwest in navigating factory farm regulation and opportunities for public engagement. In addition to her role with us at SRAP, Ashlen has a growing passion for permaculture, and she invites others to experience food production through her role as a director of a community garden in Trenton, Missouri. Beyond all of that, Ashlen is a pro at coalition building. She has been integral to movement building in her own state, and she provides expert guidance to us in our work with the Food and Farm Network. So Ashlen, thank you for leading this conversation today, and I will pass the baton to you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And thank you again to everyone else who's joining us today. Whether you're part of an organization or an academic working on food and farm issues, or someone living near a proposed or existing factory farm, whether you're a farmer or a person who wants to just learn more and figure out how to plug in, we all have such a crucial role to play in this goal of building a socially responsible food future. And this is the heart of our next panel about building people power and uniting in collaborative coalitions to drive that change. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge that by far the most rewarding privilege of this work is the incredible people we get to build relationships with. And we've heard already from many of these people during the summit, and we're going to hear from some more today. But even to those of you just listening in, as we work alongside you and your community groups, we are frequently in awe of your readiness to come to the aid of others facing similar threats in their communities. We see it time and time again within our states that we work in, but this support web has expanded significantly and now extends across the entire country, where people in Illinois are sharing references with people in Kansas that they got from North Carolina, and so on. So this camaraderie that is building, it's the key not only to building momentum, but also endurance in this long uphill battle for justice, and driving that public awareness around the negative impacts of industrial livestock production, and also offering hope for a path forward. And these panelists, I'm excited to introduce them today because they each offer us an excellent example of building that network of people power. So they not only represent a different region of the country, but also a unique coalition with varying approaches to building that power and driving change on this issue. So I'm going to introduce them all first, and then I'll come back to them with our questions. So first we have Forrest Jahnke, who is the program coordinator for Crawford Stewardship Project in Wisconsin, and also the president of the board of directors for the Sustained Rural Wisconsin Network, or SRWN. And hold on, we're probably going to have a lot of acronyms in this panel, so I might have to jot them down. Next, we have Jack Bucchioni, representing the Sussex Health and Environmental Network, or SHEN, in Sussex County, Delaware. Third, we have Karen Hudson, who is a senior regional representative for SRAP, as well as the co-founder of the Illinois Coalition for Clean Air and Water, or ICCAW. Hi, Karen. And finally, we have Dan Lorimer, who has retired from the Sierra Club Rio Grande chapter, but is still helping to lead the New Mexico Citizens Dairy Coalition. So here's our panel. Thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and wisdom with us today. So I have a couple of questions for each of you guys, and I know you have so much to share, but we'll take about 3 minutes for each question, and then that'll allow us some good time at the end for Q&A. So starting with Forrest. Forrest, tell us about your work there in Wisconsin and about SRWN. How did this coalition come to be?
Yeah, so I am the program coordinator for a small local-based organization called Crawford Stewardship Project, and that organization started a little over a decade ago around the expansion of one of our local farms into our first and so far only CAFO here in Crawford County. And that was right around the time that the state was actively removing local control from these operations for our communities. And Edie, who is on this in this group here, she was the founder at the time, and they recognized that really we couldn't just be working in isolation in our own community. That was our backyard. That was where we wanted or had the most ability to work. But these issues and the local control is being stripped away at the state level. So this was before I came on, but Sustain Rural Wisconsin Network was started up as a coalition of various grassroots groups around the state, like Crawford Stewardship Project, although we are one of the few organizations that is fortunate enough to have paid staff and have a little bit more capacities. A lot of the folks we work with are just wonderful, impassioned volunteers doing the thing, protecting their land and their water in their communities. So currently I am the president of the board of Sustain Rural Wisconsin Network. And we've done a lot of things together over the years, from rallies at the state capitol to lobby days to we're doing some well test subsidies right now for neighbors of CAFOs or proposed CAFOs to do that. We've done a push for a statewide CAFO moratorium, knowing that it was completely politically unfeasible with the current legislature we have. But many individual communities have either passed moratoriums or resolutions for the state to have a moratorium. And in general, we get together every month and have a good conversation and get updates on the legal angle, political angles, what's going on in our different communities, and how we can support each other.
Excellent, thank you. And so then how do you see SRWN, like what role is SRWN playing in this state then? I mean, I feel like you guys are a hub really for educating people and providing support.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good characterization for our core operations, really just supporting each other, sharing information, articles, what's going on at the state level, and making sure that our strategies are in alignment and we're not, that we're building off of each other's campaigns and not divided. So we do hope to be doing some more active support going forward for some of the communities that are parts of our coalition. This next fundraising drive, we're hoping to raise some money to hire someone, to contract someone who can do some support with evaluation of nutrient management plans and really re-engaging people with some of the scientific and agronomic expertise that can be lacking. You know, when a CAFO comes to town and suddenly we have to flip through this book of 300 pages of a nutrient management plan and have no idea what to look for. So figuring out those little niches where we can be most effective and most helpful for all the individual organizations across the state doing great work. And we would like to be doing more pushing of our state government to take a more active role in regulations and protecting our water, but I don't know how familiar you are with the political situation in Wisconsin right now, but it's a little hard to get things done at that level at the moment. So we do what we can, and most of us are most effective at the local level. So we're figuring out how we can best support that. And I didn't know you were into permaculture. I actually, I was born and raised on a little permaculture cooperative where I'm sitting right now. So we'll have to touch base about that sometime.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, you haven't used up all of your time yet for us, so I'm going to ask you one more question. How have you seen like public education in Wisconsin grow over the past few years that you guys have been working together?
Yeah, I think that is one hopeful angle, actually, although we've not gotten nearly as much done as we would like to on legislation and administrative rules and CAFOs stopped and things like that, I really think that in the realm of public opinion, we are winning, and people are starting to understand what's happening in agriculture. Words like karst geology, that implies very sensitive bedrock, is starting to enter the common vernacular. Groundwater is really entering a lot of the public conversation. There's been a lot of state attention paid to that, a lot of lip service paid to that by our governor and agencies, although again, not as much happening as we'd like to see. But yeah, I think on the public education front, we're really doing well. And so hopefully at some point that will translate into action by our leaders, who I always like to say are actually more like followers than they are leaders. So, you know, if we all get educated and we all start to push them, maybe they'll hop on the train.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Forrest. And moving to Jack in Delaware, how did you become involved with SHEN, Jack, and what is this coalition working to accomplish?
Rather than tell you, I'm going to show you. First of all, welcome to Southern Delaware. Many of you know the situation here, but for those that don't, let me get everybody on the same page. Southern Delaware, most of the water sources are wells. It's also a large concentration of CAFOs, chicken farms and chicken processing plants. So many that it dominates the landscape. If you take a look at it, there's Delaware, there's Southern Delaware, and the number 10 becomes significant down here. Why we all came together, to answer your question, is we had a lot of advocacy groups that had a common cause. The water was poisoned, and getting poisoned by the largest employer in the state, agriculture, namely chicken CAFOs. The number 10 is nitrates per liter, number of parts of nitrates per meter. All you need to know is below 10 is safe, above 10 million parts is bad things. Some of the wells in this particular area are tracking in at 93 to 95 as opposed to 10. So what you're looking at, folks, here is one of the largest, let's call it the second fastest growing area in the country of cancer, new cancer cases. It's a problem. EJ communities, underserved communities, and fence line communities are all in this area. If you look closely at it, you'll see some green dots. Those are elementary schools. I just put those in just to give you a little idea of proximity. So that's the statement of problem. We've all banded together to make sure that we try to find solutions to this because it's a major problem in Delaware. What are some of the things we've done? We support the local farmers, local family farms. Listening to John Eichert in past sessions, we do believe that the CAFOs can be dismantled and the food supply system can amply supplied by the small family farmers. One of the things that's worked, one of the solutions has been, we've been putting together labels or other groups grown locally. Delmarva means Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, which is the area we're talking about. So when folks from the consumer side are driven to the farmers markets and they see these labels, they have a tendency to buy here, and it's pulling and reshaping the landscape, if you will. All right. The other thing that we have done is we support, if you don't know Maya Van Rostrom, she wrote a book called The Green Amendment. The Green Amendment is not to be confused with the federal subject that was going on in terms of this. What Maya has done is successfully gone to the state of Pennsylvania and put the right to clean water and clean air into their state constitution. For your information, it's not in any other state. So she's now in Delaware, and legally, we are trying to put this in. So if we do this, we can defend it legally. The other thing that's happened is President Joe Biden signed an executive order not too long ago. And basically what he did was 40% of federal monies. This is where I come in. I follow the money. The federal monies come into the state of Delaware. It gets into local committees, and it sometimes gets into EJ or underserved communities. More often than not, when it's a big pile of cash, other people put their hands in. So the idea here is 40% of every federal dollar coming in has to go to EJ communities, underserved communities, or fence line communities. Now, that sounds great, but the next thing is important. Who stepped up are our state legislators, Representative Larry Lambert, State Senator Marie Pinckney, and you'll recognize this name who's also on the board, Maria Payan from SRAP. And this is an oversight committee, first one in the country, that's been assigned that looks at every dollar coming in to make sure it does go to the right place. Not a bad idea. Next thing, we have a number of people that are running for political office, the political solution. Myself, I'm running for senator. And we have a lot of groundswell support from the activist groups that are going through. One of the things that have been added, some of you on this, I see a lot of friendly faces. I invested in buying a media station. In the media station, Blue Coast Talk, we broadcast many of the ideas in terms of what's happening in the supply chain community, moving toward the sustainable farms and the local farmers. So that's it, folks. Let me turn it back over to you, Jade.
Thank you, Jack. That's awesome. Next, we have Karen Hudson in Illinois. Hi, Karen. Karen, tell us a little bit about ICCAW and how it formed and why it was necessary to pull together a statewide coalition.
Hi, thanks, Ashlen. It's great to be here today. Well, we started out years ago in 1996 as Families Against Rural Messes, or FARM, and we kind of morphed into helping folks all over the state of Illinois and formed Illinois Coalition for Clean Air and Water. And we have assisted folks in probably over 40 to 50 counties in the state of Illinois as they see the influx of CAFOs coming into their rural communities. And often when we get a call from them through ICCAW and the Socially Responsible Ag Project, folks have no idea of how to confront these facilities. They have no idea about how the law works. And we start from ground zero in educating them. That's one of the first things that we do. Since then, we've done a lot at ICCAW. In fact, we filed a notice of intent to sue under the Clean Water Act, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, for not implementing the Clean Water Act. This is a citizen suit that we filed. And that triggered an investigation by the federal EPA on the activities of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. And there are many things that we found that they are not doing to protect our health in Illinois. And one of them was keeping a log or an accounting of all the facilities in the state of Illinois. And we actually started our own investigation through Northern Illinois University on, we studied at least 44 counties. There's many more than that. But for example, we ended up finding 508 CAFOs approximately, where Illinois EPA only found an accounting for 213 at that time. That's a problem, where our state agencies have no idea where these facilities are located. That's a public health issue. That's a food security issue. It's a big issue, and it's one of the stipulations under the Clean Water Act that these are supposed to be accounted for. That's just one of the things that we addressed with this petition. And after the investigation by the federal EPA of Illinois EPA, they ended up getting a failing grade by the federal EPA, which made national news. and put them on notice. And right now they're still trying to come up to speed on correcting a lot of those problems in the state of Illinois. So that's some of the bigger work we've done, but we work on the ground with folks when they attend public hearings. In Illinois, we have no local control, although we can have a public hearing if there's over 2,500 hogs, for example, coming into a community. 75 registered voters have to get signatures to even get a public hearing. And once these hearings occur, folks have to start at ground zero as to what questions to ask and what research to present. And we assist people in these public hearings. One of the things that we have found out through research at University of Illinois, researcher there, Peter Goldsmith, looked at these public hearings across the state of Illinois that I've been attending for many, many years myself. And we find that they did find in this study at University of Illinois that 70% of these local people that attend these hearings where the livestock producer will have to answer questions and present their project to the public, that 70% of the people oppose these facilities that attend these hearings. And 89% of them actually question the legitimacy of the CAFO model and the regulators that are supposed to be protecting them, and the lawmakers there that are voting for these in all these counties. And one of the most interesting things that we have found in that study, that 5% of the folks that attended and appeared at these hearings across the state of Illinois were mostly brought in from outside the community by either the state government officials or the industry itself. So we see standing room only at some of these hearings where local people are attending, and there's folks in these rooms that they've never even seen before, brought in by the industry. So I think that probably is something that happens all over the country. But we've had a lot of victories in our state as well lately, and I don't know how much time we have left. But we have recently had a victory in Winnebago County, and I can address that in the next question. Thanks.
No, that's okay. You're leading right into it. And I know that you guys have kind of a special toolbox that you use when you help new communities. So go ahead, go share about.
One of the things that we're learning through one of our local senators who's been so supportive of us is that we start at the grassroots level. One of the things that he has recommended that has been one of the best tools is one of our folks that I work with very closely, Cindy Arnett, who's a county board member in Fulton County and also has been affected by a large facility on her farm property, as she has kept a notebook of running problems that have happened on her property. And when we go down to Springfield, she brings that notebook and shows the elected officials photos and actual evidence. And he said that's one of the best tools that he has ever seen a citizen bring. And she updates that notebook monthly, weekly, monthly, whatever. Whenever we need that, there's a running picture of what's happening there. But what we're doing is we have sample resolutions at SRAP, and I know that Forrest Jahnke in Wisconsin has done this as well. They have a lot of information on their website, but resolutions at the local level have worked. We've passed those at the local level, and in one county, there's a group that I'm working with that's just done a fantastic job, Citizens Against Hog Factory Farms, and they have opposed 2 5,000 head facilities. And that group got together with our assistants at SRAP and ended up with 3,000 signatures against this. And you don't think signatures make a difference? They do. Even though that may not make a law change, a signature starting at the local grassroots level makes a difference. They ended up with 30 different letters from local businesses opposing these facilities and passed over 11 resolutions against these facilities at the local level. The school district passed a resolution, the local forest preserve district, and all of these other local city councils, county board, and other local institutions passed resolutions, and those were taken down to the Illinois Department of Agriculture. They were stunned at the amount of public participation. And now that those facilities are basically past the point where they're going to be built, but Those people have ordered more signs. They have over 600 signs up in their community, and they know that they have to keep their opposition and education on this issue current, because they see what's coming down the pike, that they are not going to let their community be affected by these facilities. So that's just an example of one of the most recent victories. The other is two ladies that I have worked with in Marshall County opposing a 20,000 head facility. These are two farm widows still living on their property that made such a difference in their community. And that facility was stopped as well. So whether you're young or old, big or small, by starting at the grassroots local level and using your voice with some of the tools that SRAP is providing, we've really made a difference. And I think we need to talk about these victories and share those with some of the people that are listening today.
Great stories, Karen. Thank you so much. And now let's talk about New Mexico with Dan. So Dan, can you tell us a little bit about the history of the New Mexico Citizens Dairy Coalition and the reason your group came together?
I sure can, Ashlen. First, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity and SRAP. The New Mexico Citizens Dairy Coalition was formed in 2009 when our legislature, which at that time was a Republican-led legislature, and we had a Republican governor. This piece of legislature required industry-specific groundwater discharge rules for two industries, the copper industry and the dairy industry. They did the dairy industry first. The copper industry rule is still in court. The dairy rule took about 5 years to develop. The dairy industry believed that they were going to come in and write their own rule, and were surprised to see a coalition of New Mexico citizens and organizations come together to try to make sure that as the rule was developed, it was a comprehensive rule. And we ended up with what we feel is a reasonably full-bodied discharge rule. In New Mexico, the citizens own the groundwater. There's no privately owned groundwater. It's held in trust by the state. And so every withdrawal requires a permit by the state engineer. This is a little bit different than a lot of states. But because of that, the citizens who actually are the owners of the groundwater need to be part of these processes. The New Mexico Citizens Dairy Coalition supplied that element during the negotiations that developed the rule. And that rule was developed by industry representatives, agency representatives from the Groundwater Quality Bureau here in the Environment Department here in New Mexico, and the Citizens Coalition. Because of the expertise supplied not only by the New Mexico Environmental Law Center, which is very helpful for coalitions to get a real change happening through hearing processes and through legislative processes, having an attorney, and this was a volunteer organization, they volunteered this help, and also having the technical expertise of particularly Kathy Martin, who was working for SRAP at that time, absolutely key to developing these groundwater discharge regulations here in New Mexico. 4 or 5 years of negotiations ended up in a settlement agreement that we were signatories to that resulted in our Water Quality Control Commission adopting the rule that we've been living with now for 6 years. What we have done functionally as an organization is continued to represent the public in the process of this regulating through this rule, which means that we're in constant contact with the agency, where we have a very respectful relationship, that while I think there is a subtext that the public input is a little bit daunting and a little bit of a pain in the ass for the agency, they recognize that here in New Mexico, it's a critical element. And so our coalition has supplied that. Our membership is frontline people who live near dairy CAFOs. Sorry, here in New Mexico, the CAFOs are dairy CAFOs. We have an average herd size over 2,500 head, about 180 dairies like that here in New Mexico. And so we have frontline members who live in the communities that are impacted by these dairy facilities. We have statewide organizations who are generally water quality and animal protection organizations. And we have national organizations, Food and Water Watch, the Sierra Club, Environment New Mexico, Environment USA, and organizations on that magnitude. And our coalition has a rounded presentation to the public because we have the ability to communicate with large membership organizations. And our voice is taken seriously by the agency also. It's taken seriously by the legislature. And I might add that I was the lobbyist for the Sierra Club here in New Mexico for 7 legislative sessions, and that's 14 years. And so I know the process and I know the players, and we're able to work in that legislative arena with some effectiveness. Especially effective at bringing up the efficacy of the dairy rule after 5 or 6 years of use. We're very anxious to see an overview from the agency of the effectiveness of the dairy rule here in New Mexico. How are we doing, Ashlen?
Great. We're a tiny bit early, but I think I'm going to give that time to questions in the chat. I know Jade has been keeping track for us. I have my own questions, but I'm going to put them on hold. Let's get through the chat questions first.
Yeah, perfect. We have about 5 questions so far. So if there's time, we can circle back with some other questions. The first one we have is from Peg, and this question is for Dan. They want to know, they say, the Sierra Club has membership and state chapters in almost every state with CAFOs. What specifically can the Sierra Club most effectively do to fight CAFOs or any of CAFO's outputs or structures that continue this awful system? How can the Sierra Club join with other orgs for a stronger national coalition?
Well, thanks for that question. And while I no longer speak for the Sierra Club, either in New Mexico or nationally, Sierra Club is a membership organization. It's the largest one in the country of environmental organizations driven through a democratic process by its membership. And we use that. We use our media expertise. We use our lobbying expertise in Washington. I am not aware of a national group that the Sierra Club has instituted, and I'm sure that the Sierra Club is members of some national groups that are looking at the questions of the paradigm of industrial agriculture. Other groups may be taking a stronger national position than the Sierra Club, but the Sierra Club is great because it's been around forever and it's got a respect attached to it as kind of a mainstream, large environmental organization that isn't dominated at the top, that it's a democratically run organization. And so while it's not always right, it's always there. So I guess that would be my response to that.
Great. The next question we have is from Cheryl, and they say, how can we engage the local farmers in coalition building? As Peg Clevenger commented yesterday, they are key players.
You all have really great input on this. Jack, I want to ask you, because I know you guys have been really trying to prop up your local farmers there. Let's have you answer this one first.
Our local farmers attend all our meetings, and we have farm to table sessions where we bring in dignitaries. And I again, kudos to Maria Payan for doing a lot of that. They're connected with our organizations. The other thing is we leverage our media. Our media is basically community broadcasting, and we bring in our local farmers. Let's take a look at your farm. Why is it different? Let's go to the farmer's market. Let's look at these labels. What does it mean to buy locally as opposed to a CAFO? And they start talking. So they become part of the media message, if you will. And our message is pretty tight. Buy from these guys because we're trying to build sustainable farms, and we're trying to support the local farmers over and over and over again. And you know what? It's taking root.
Thank you. And Karen, I know you have a fun story. Do you want to share that one?
Well, one of the things that the industry likes to say is that when factory farms come to a community, it's city people who have moved to the country that don't understand what agriculture is. And so many of our clients that we assist are actually family farmers that have lived on their properties and farmed for generations. And we work with our local farmers. In fact, in Fulton County, Illinois, a local farmer was fighting a 20,000 head facility that was locating next to his property, where he actually raised livestock of his own and was actually raised grain and livestock of his own. He was a Farm Bureau member of the local Farm Bureau Board of Directors in Fulton County and asked Farm Bureau for their assistance in opposing this. And they said, we support farms of all sizes. It doesn't matter what size, you do not have our support. And this farmer actually publicly resigned from the local Farm Bureau board, and that made national news as well. But one of the things is that farmers can't leave once a facility is in and their health is suffering. I know farmers who can't even work on their property at times because of these facilities. And we have to send the message that these are not city folk who come to the country. These are actual farmers who've lived here for generations who are suffering from these operations, and their physical health is actually damaged. So I work with many, many farmers across the country that are joining in and saying that, you know, we can't move. This is our livelihood. This is our home. We're going to fight as hard as you are. So that's just a short story about how farmers are affected. I could go on for 2 hours about that, but that's just one example of how we're working with family farmers.
I want to give Forrest a real quick opportunity. Forrest, do you have any comment on that one before we go to the next question?
Sure, yeah, just real briefly to both of those questions, as far as the Sierra Club and some of the bigger organizations, as was mentioned, they count on a lot of people and have a lot more resources than the local groups that end up struggling against these things. So yeah, if those things can be leveraged to the benefit of the local communities, money, people, signatures, lobbying support, media connections, all of that is invaluable to local groups trying to start up and do things. And as far as local farmers, yes, always very important. I see in the chat that the Farmers Union has been plugged as a more reasonable farmer organization than the Farm Bureau, depending on how we want to characterize the Farm Bureau. But and I know it varies state to state also what position the Farmers Union takes, but they're a true farmer-led democratic organization. I've been a part of the Farmers Union here for a few years now and have gotten into some of their policy debates, which are real active participatory democratic processes. So yeah, I definitely recommend looping in with the Farmers Union if you're having trouble communicating with farmers, not really sure how to frame things, because yeah, they really do represent farmers. They don't just get members because they happen to provide insurance to people like Farm Bureau.
Ashlen, our local Farm Bureau, or our local Sierra Club chapter, the Heart of Illinois chapter, has joined in on us in all of our local oppositions. So locally, we've had very good support from the Sierra Club. So
Great, thank you. Okay, Jade, what do we have next?
Awesome. So I just want to name, I do see that Cheryl has another question right after, but I'm going to try and get as many voices into the room first. So Cheryl, I'll circle back with your second question once everybody has a chance to ask their first question. So the next question comes from Sarah, and she says, Karen, that's so important that you highlight that at these local meetings, industry folks are coming from outside of the community. Have you experienced pro-CAFO groups claiming the opposite, that people who challenge CAFOs are outside agitators?
Yes. In fact, at one hearing, a CAFO promoter from the Illinois pork producers asked who I worked for, what I was doing there. SRAP and Illinois Coalition for Clean Air and Water does not enter a rural community unless we are asked for assistance. We don't go looking for places to go. They come to us. And that's one of the things that they say, that we come into rural communities and disrupt people. In fact, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I spoke about a pamphlet that was put out by the Minnesota Farm Bureau called "When an Activist Group Comes to Town," and we were highlighted in that we go into rural communities and disrupt, when actually we go into rural communities and bring peer-reviewed research and all the facts, which are, there is so much more research here now than we've had 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that we try to keep up with that monthly and provide all of that peer-reviewed research in an easily translatable form to all of our clients. So that's what we do. And we allow people in their rural communities to make their own decisions. We bring them the facts and they decide how they're going to either oppose that, accept that type of model of production, but we are bringing all the facts to them and letting them decide. And most of the time they decide that they do not want that model of production in their rural communities.
Thanks, Karen.
The next question comes from Maria, and they ask, has anyone gotten involved in recruiting people to run for local or state government, school boards, citizen representatives on commissions?
Anybody want to buzz in? Jack, go ahead.
I'll take that. Yes, a lot. We believe that down ballot, getting down all the way down to dog catcher in the different areas, what are their views? Members of the community, usually leadership from the community, get them actively involved in these types of issues, which are local, but more importantly, they're on a survival level, because in our particular area, just a little more background in Delaware, we're one of, if not the lowest lying state in the union. So the well water going into the aquifers goes to the ocean, and seawater back in, and nitrates and all kinds of bad things. So this particular issue draws attention. So to the question at hand, yes, we're trying to recruit, bring people into the meetings, get them to run for office at all levels in Delaware, because we believe in working inside, working outside, the political, the legal solutions, and so on. We have to fix this. We need to get everybody on the same page. Yes, it works.
Thank you. Dan, did you have something to say to that too?
Well, I would just add, Ashlen, that the New Mexico Citizens Dairy Coalition works closely with a couple of senators who represent our issues at the legislature, and that one of the benefits of having the Sierra Club as a member of that coalition is they're extremely involved in endorsing good candidates, and we do that. I say we. The Sierra Club has a significant effort every election cycle to identify, to encourage good candidates, and then to endorse them also. And we find that very helpful at the coalition level, because when we work in Santa Fe, we already have friends in place.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to throw out really quickly, I know of some coalitions that who can't step into, you know, like helping people run for office or that type of thing, who come up with candidate questions, you know, like a list of questions for the public to then take out and ask their local representatives how they feel on these issues. So Jade, what's next?
Next, we have a question from Jean. Did I hear correctly that Karen Hudson's research has gone to the University of Missouri Library? Please clarify. Thanks.
I think it has. I know that you know, our oral history is now installed in the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library down in Springfield, Illinois, about 2 years ago. So I'm sure that that's there, and a lot of our research is everywhere. I do know that back in 2000, it was 1997, 1998. One of our presentations, Managing Manure in Harmony with the Environment and Society, was at Ames, Iowa. That's online. The research is everywhere. The paper that I wrote for my very first presentation back at the Managing Manure conference in Ames, Iowa, was called Patchwork of Rural Injustice. It was one of the first papers I'd written since I graduated from Illinois State University. And that's online. It's still valid. Everything that is in there can still be followed as a guideline by folks. So I'm sure that's probably in the University of Missouri. I haven't checked lately, but I'm pretty sure that it is. So. And there's a TED Talk that I've done if you'd like to go to that. If you look up a TEDx Manhattan 2011 Karen Hudson, my talk is online about what happened in our rural community in Peoria County, Illinois.
Great. The next question I have is from Claudia. For Dan, when did legislation pass assuring ownership of groundwater by the citizens of New Mexico?
That, and thanks for that, wasn't a legislative piece. It's in our Constitution. And so that has been in place since 1912.
Answer. The next question comes from Peggy. The first documentary talked about the fact that the concentration of power rests with the meat packers. There are only 4 corporations for beef processing in the entire country. The second of the 3-part series talks about the harms to the meat packing workers, specifically chicken processing. Has any group taken on the meat processing slaughter plants and worked backwards to the CAFOs?
That's a good question. Forrest, I see you unmuted. Forrest and Jack probably have answers.
We haven't directly, although in a local county just to the north of us, there was a proposal for a large slaughter plant to process pigs from Iowa, coming across the river from premium Iowa pork. And we did actually support the group up there that managed to stop that from coming in. It was another one of these areas very susceptible to groundwater contamination, caves and sinkholes and all sorts of things that would be dangerous for that. And that was not stopped by the regulators, but there was enough blowback and pushback from the community that they voluntarily pulled their permit application and did not move forward with it. And now actually that facility, which was a local butcher shop, there's been some local investors who have stepped up and are hoping to reopen it, I think in this next year, to help local farmers get processing for their animals. And so there's sort of this dynamic here where there is a real need for processing of animals. And there's farmers who, have had to euthanize their animals in the last year because there hasn't been processing capacity. So we do need that. And butcher shops have been closing in local small communities all across the country. However, we want to be trying to prevent, again, just like CAFOs, the corporate consolidation of the whole system, which only profits a few corporations, has negative impacts for the local community. And as we saw in COVID, these few plants processing animals for huge parts of the industry makes the industry very vulnerable to any sort of shock to the system like COVID. And suddenly they're euthanizing millions of pigs in Iowa. So yeah, a little bit of experience on one small scale, but I know this dynamic's happening all over.
I want to let Jack answer that question too, and that may take up all the rest of our time.
Cutting to the chase, I don't know about beef or cattle, but I could tell you about chickens. If you really want to get into it, it's not a 3-minute answer here. Go to Google and Google Mount Ayr. Mount Ayr. Many of the large chicken processing plants are in southern Delaware. You name them, they're here. But the activist groups and the community members basically got legally involved. It's a long story, big story. I encourage you all to take a look at it. We as activists in southern Delaware, all the way to biogas and to permits, to spraying of fields and so on, we go after pretty much every one of them. And we have a lot of pro bono legal work that comes in to help us to do that. But I would start, if you really want to know about chickens and you want to know about this, just please go to Mount Ayr and set aside a couple hours, because it's going to be laborious and long and reading, and you'll get real insight to how active we are in Delaware. Yes.
Maybe Maria can drop a link into the chat or something that people can go to. Also, there were some other good questions in the chat that we didn't get a chance to get to. So if you guys have a few minutes to look through and see if you want to add any answers, that would be fantastic.